Well, it is such an honor to be here with every single one of you, and welcome to the second week of a series that we are going through the book, the chapter of Psalm 23, the book of Psalms, specifically Psalm chapter 23, which is perhaps the most famous and prolific passage of Scripture in all of the Bible, certainly the most prolific of the book of Psalms. And really what you'll discover, if you missed week one, I would encourage you to go online, check that out. It really laid the foundation of this whole series last week. You can see it on our YouTube channel. But what you'll discover is that God is a God who cares for us. He is a God who gives us direction. He is a God that provides protection. He is a God that blesses us with provision. He is what we called last week, He is the good shepherd. This is the God that we serve, and I think it's really important for us to just sit sometimes and remind ourselves of the faithfulness and the goodness of a God who loves us. If you remember from last week, He is the creator shepherd. He is so big, so vast, so powerful. His majesty is beyond our comprehension, and yet He wants a personal relationship with us, with you and me individually. It blows my mind to think about the kindness and the goodness of our God. So what we're doing in this series is we're going line by line, verse by verse through the 23rd Psalm. Today we're going to be focusing on verses 2 and 3. So I want to read them to you starting in verse 1. This is where we spent the entirety of the message last week. We're going to go into verses 2 and 3. Here's what it says. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake." You know, when we read this psalm, what's happening here is King David, the shepherd king of Israel, is looking back and reflecting on a period of time when he also served as a shepherd. And he is recognizing that in so many different ways that he is like the sheep, but God Almighty is like his shepherd. In fact, Jesus picks up this analogy in John chapter 10. We looked at this last week. And Jesus says this about Himself. He says, "I am the good shepherd." And then He calls us sheep. Now, I don't know if you understood this yet or not, but you're about to here in a second. When God calls us and refers to us as His sheep, it's not a compliment. Y'all know that, right? Like it's not derogatory, but it's not a compliment. Like, oh, sheep, the most strongest creatures in the animal kingdom. You know, let me tell you something about sheep. They're not sitting on the top of the food chain, all right? They may be on the very bottom. So the interesting thing about sheep, I think our vision and our view of sheep gets tainted by the culture of Christianity. Like if you ever go into a Christian bookstore, you're probably going to see a picture of a sheep somewhere, probably in the shepherd's arms, and that sheep is beautiful. Got nice white wool, his coat is nice and clean, he's sweet and innocent, and like the good shepherd's like, yeah, my sheep. You know, shepherd's all muscular, and he's like, I got you, and like this whole moment. But have you ever seen a sheep in real life? They don't look like that. That is a romanticized image that I think we subconsciously use to make ourselves feel better about the analogy. Like I think that's what's happening. Like if you see a sheep in real life, let me tell you something, they are dirty, they are dingy, and they're dumb. All right, like it's, somebody just said, oh, yeah. Like, you're going to speak it like it is this morning, church. Not the sharpest creatures on the face of the earth. And in fact, it's pretty interesting. Sheep, you do realize they have no natural defenses. Like if you think about most creatures, like they've got something. The wolves that attack the sheep, they got fangs to bite them. The mountain lions that go after the sheep, they got claws and also sharp teeth to get them. And so then like other animals, they have defensive mechanisms. Like deer, they can run real fast. And goats, they can climb real good. And so they can get away. You know what sheep do when they come to get attacked? Flock together. Here's what this means. We're going to all bunch up together so that the big bad wolf and the big bad lion will eat my friends, but not me. Like, that's their strategy. Maybe they'll get full before they make it to me because they can't outrun them. They can't fight against them. They don't have claws. They don't have venom in their bites. Like, can you imagine? Like, they got nothing. They flock together. And without someone to protect them, sheep are in trouble. Without a shepherd there to fend off those that would come to attack him, those sheep get in trouble. And left on their own, this is why they have a reputation of being dumb, they make bad decisions. And it's not, there's been study, I researched this, and there's people like, oh, the poor sheep, they're not that dumb, they're kind of intelligent. And they're like, I have all these studies. But here's what they do. They have mob instincts because it's part of their flocking, like, defense mechanism. So they naturally just follow whatever one sheep does. And if one sheep gets an idea to do something that's not very smart, guess what the rest of the sheep do? The same thing, that's not very smart. In fact, let me show this to you. There was a news article that I found that in 2005, about 20 years ago, you can show the picture up on the screen for me. Here, this is a real news article. It says, woolly jumpers baffle shepherds. That's hilarious right there. The woolly jumpers baffle shepherds. Because here's what happened. There was a flock of about 1,500 sheep in this city called Gavas, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, in the nation of Turkey. And the shepherds were on their lunch break, and they looked up, and they saw one of those sheep run to the edge of a 45-foot cliff. And the sheep decided, why not jump? And so that little sheep jumped off the edge of the cliff, plummeting to its death. Yeah. So guess what the rest of the flock did? Followed after them. All 1,500 sheep, one after another, jumped off the 45-foot cliff. You ready for the craziest part about the story? Over 400 of them died. You're saying, Joe, wait a second. You said 1,500 jumped. Yeah. The rest, the other 1,100 survived because they were cushioned by the dead bodies of their fellow sheep. The dead. Is that too morbid for church? I don't know. Like, that's a true story. They just piled up and made a little woolly pillow. Like, that's, they survived. 1,100 survived out of 450 plummeted to their death. Okay. Y'all got the picture? Here's the point I'll make from that illustration. Sheep were made to follow a shepherd, not one another. Hear that, church? There's a lot of different things we can follow. Some of you, I talked about this last week. You're following yourself, or you're following some leader. You're following some person you think is really smart and wise. Let me tell you something. There's only one person worth following, and his name is Jesus. He's the good shepherd. And when the sheep lose their shepherd's guidance, what happens is they often look sideways to the flock instead of upward to the shepherd. And my hope for us today, church, is that we would be the kind of people that keep our gaze fixed upward. That we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, not somebody else. Is that okay, everybody? So let me go through this passage, starting in verse 2. Here's the first phrase that King David speaks of God. Here's what the good shepherd does. This is God. This is Jesus. He says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. What he's talking about here is the value of rest. That a good shepherd leads the sheep to a place of rest. Now, here's what's interesting about green pastures. When you come into a green pasture, you know what a sheep wants to do when they see that green grass? They want to eat. And so the first thing you do when you come to a green pasture isn't lay down to rest. The first thing you would do is actually to eat. In fact, a sheep will not lay down to rest until its hunger has been satisfied. And so for a shepherd to create conditions, it says he makes me lie down in green pastures, means that the sheep's needs have been met to such an extent that when they come to the green pastures, all they have left to do is rest. This is not only that God gives us rest, it's also that God satisfies all the deepest needs of our heart so that we can be in a place where we can actually rest. This is about the ability of God to provide for his people. Do you see this? When it says that he makes me lie down in green pastures, what it means is he is creating the conditions for. So God is supplying everything we need so that we can be able to lie down in rest. I think our nation, I think the people in the Western society as a whole, we need some more rest. And how much do we just run after the next thing, after the next thing, after the next thing? Always more and more and more. Sometimes we just need to rest. Let me tell you something, church. I'm preaching to myself today. I needed this word this week as I was studying it. We need to rest. If you go back to the beginning of creation, Genesis chapter 1, it's really interesting as you study the beginning of all things. And in Genesis chapter 1, it talks about God creating these different things on different days. Anybody happen to remember what God created on the sixth day? Anybody remember what the sixth day was? It was us. He created us. And so on the sixth day of creation, God creates man and woman. It says it like this, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. He creates Adam and Eve. And at the end of that sixth day, he looks at his creation and he says, behold, it was good. And there was morning and there was night on the sixth day. Now watch what happens on the seventh day, the very next day, Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. It says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he, somebody say it with me, and he, that's an important term. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So think about this. If man was created on the sixth day, what did he do on the first day of his existence? He rested. Isn't that interesting? That the very first day of the existence of mankind, the very first thing they ever did was they rested. I don't know about you, but when I'm when I get up in the morning, I'm ready to do some stuff. I'm ready to get after some things. And God decided in his wisdom that the very best thing that man could do on their first day of existence was rest. It's also why the first day of the week is the day of rest. That your day begins in rest, not ending in rest. That distinction matters. That we should actually work from the place of rest, not work until we drop dead, need some rest. Does this make sense? So it's always been God's intention for his people that we would walk in rest, but we rebel against it. There is just something innate within us that says, no, I don't want to rest, I need to work. And listen, I'm not saying work is bad. You were actually created to work. That's part of the way God wired you and created you, so that you would be able to produce, that you would be able to do good work. But to give God your best work, it requires your rest. Why do we not rest? This isn't in your notes. I'm going to give them to you. Go kind of fast. If you want to look back on it, just go on YouTube, watch the sermon back. I'm going to give you 5 reasons I think people don't rest. Number 1, I think people don't rest because we've misplaced our identity. In other words, some people, they base their worth on their work. They have confused their work with their worth. Or they have conflated their net worth with their self-worth. Don't misplace your identity, Manna Church. We got to know who we are. We are sons and daughters of God Most High. What we do and what we produce does not define us. Can I get a good amen from somebody today? The first reason we don't rest is misplaced identity. Here's the second reason. I think it's because of the grip of materialism. Materialism. We just want more. We're not satisfied. We're not content with what we have now. We want more. We look at the people next to us. We look at our neighbors. We look at the people that we follow on Instagram. By the way, that's a big lie. Seeing everybody's highlights and their best self, not seeing what's really going on in that home. That's a fact right there. That's not part of the message. That's going to help somebody. And we look at these things, we look, oh, I want a life like that. I want a vacation like that. I want a car like that. I want a house like that. I want the hobbies like that. And we just want more and more and more. And the only way to get more is we got to work to get more. And what happens if you're not careful is you spend the first half of your life, you will spend your health to gain wealth, only to find yourself on the backstretch spending all your wealth to get back your health. Don't make the mistake. Don't fall into the trap of materialism. Third reason I think people don't rest is out of envy. That comparison trap I was just talking about. We just want to be like somebody else. We want to live the life they're living. And if we're going to live that life, we got to work for that life. It's envy, and envy is not biblical. Fourth reason is I think some people, they value achievement over relationships. The reason some people just work and work and work and never come home and are staying late at the office and aren't home with their family is because they get more value out of a sense of achievement in their work than they do the relationships that God has blessed them with. This goes back to that identity piece. But some people, they just love the feeling of, I accomplished something. And if you live for that, you're going to miss out on the most important things of life. Valuing achievement over relationships. Here's the final reason. I think some people, they refuse to rest because of insecurity. Insecurity. That can look like a lot of different ways. The most practical one is, well, I'm just afraid I'm not going to have enough. Joe, you don't, I got to have a certain amount in my retirement. Joe, I got to have a certain amount to be able to buy the food that my family needs. And I understand that there are needs that we have as human beings, and that's one thing. It's another thing to go, I never have enough, and I always got to get more, and I got to save more, and I got to put away more, because I got to be secure. Here's the problem with that. Now your security relies in your ability to produce instead of God's ability to provide. That's the problem. So for these 5 reasons, I think we can be hesitant to rest, but what God, the Good Shepherd, is inviting us into is a life where He is our provider. A life where He is the one who cares for us. He is the Good Shepherd, leads us to green pastures, makes us lie in green pastures. Everybody see this so far? If you're taking notes, you can write it down like this. God creates the conditions that produce true rest. This is what it means when it says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. And you can experience that kind of rest if you trust in the Good Shepherd. If your hope is in Him and not yourself. He is the one who promises to provide for all our needs. Everybody good? All right. He makes me lie down in green pastures. The next line of that verse says, He leads me beside still waters. Last week, I told you about a book that I've been reading as I've been preparing for this series. It's called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23, written by Philip Keller. Keller was a shepherd. He grew up in East Africa, and he watched the tribal herdsmen of his era, and then he became a sheep rancher. So he had a big production of sheep and took care of sheep for a significant part of his career and his life. And so he has all these different insights on how sheep operate and different things that sheep do. And he writes this about this concept of still waters. He notices that when sheep are thirsty, what they do is they become restless and set out in search of water. And if the sheep are not led to good water supplies of clean, pure water, what they will do is they will end up settling for whatever water they can find. And most likely, the first water they're going to find is the water that has filled the holes and the potholes along the paths that they travel. And so where these depressions in the path have been created, when it rains, the water fills them. And so they got these muddy pools. And Keller writes, these pools are filled with, filled with parasites like the nematode, the liver flukes, and other disease germs. And I don't know what any of that means, but it doesn't sound good. And so they drink from this muddy, nasty puddle, and they get these parasites that end up causing a lot of problems along the way. But if they'll just follow the Good Shepherd, the shepherd will lead them to a clean water supply. It's what the shepherd does. The only problem is some sheep, they are so thirsty and they are so impatient that even as the shepherd is leading them, they're on their way to the clean waters and they stop to drink in the muddy puddles. Sounds to me a lot like what humans do. See, we're all born with an innate thirst. We're all thirsting for something. Really what it looks like is we're thirsting for longing and meaning and significance in our life. We're thirsting for purpose. And we travel about this life and we look for things that can satisfy those desires that are in our soul. We're looking for something to give us meaning. We're looking for something that'll fill the void in our hearts that rests in that place. And if you're not careful, you'll settle for a lot of different things that may satisfy the thirst for a moment, but end up destroying your life down the road. You settle for a mud puddle filled with parasites, and it quenches the thirst in the moment, but causes your stomach to rot over time. This is what we do. There's a longing deep within our hearts for something more. I think intellectually minded people, they look for things like, they look to satisfy those longings with knowledge, science, academic careers. Others, more creative types, they look to the arts for beauty found in the images and music and the poetic. I think still others, they search for it in the place of adventure. And as I go through this list, I think you'll identify where you fit, where you've been looking for this quenching to your thirst. Some people, they look for it in adventure, and so they find that in travel, or they find that in sports, or they may find that in their hobbies, and they're just looking for something to satisfy. Man, there's got to be something more, and so they lean into these things, and they spend money on these things, and they do all these things. And I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with any of these things. Nothing wrong with travel, or sports, or hobbies, or arts, or knowledge and learning. Nothing inherently wrong with any of that, unless it becomes the thing that you give your life to because you think it's going to satisfy something within you. That's misplaced priority. For others, they're the driven folks. They find this meaning in achievements, recognition, or accumulation. The search can even become more desperate and descend to the endless pursuit of pleasure. People pursuing sex, drugs, alcohol. And while some of these pursuits are inherently more destructive than others, here's what all of them have in common: they all turn up empty. They may satisfy for a moment. In fact, I used to tell people this. I was like, listen, if you're running after sin and it doesn't feel good, it's because you didn't do it right. like there is a measure of satisfaction that comes when you pursue the desires of your flesh, but it's fleeting. Satisfies for a moment, but then it's gone. And the wake it leaves behind is far worse than the satisfaction it provides. The emptiness returns. And then I think the weary traveler begins to wonder, well, maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's not just physical or mental or emotional. Maybe this has been spiritual all along. And you think, okay, now we found the answer, but there's traps with that too. Because there's a lot of different things that you can pursue in the search of the spiritual that are completely contrary to the way of Jesus. So many different things in our culture right now. I want to be careful. You know what? I don't care. I'm just going to say it. All the energies and the crystals and the... Yeah. All these things that people are pursuing because it's spiritual that will leave you bankrupt. And so what we find is we have this inner longing in our hearts that we try to satisfy with human solutions, or, you ready for it, demonic deceptions. Because the enemy would love nothing more than to keep you away from the one source of satisfaction in your life, the one true source of joy and peace and hope, the one place that you can find the still waters, because it's Jesus. And the enemy will do everything he can to prevent you from finding that source of fulfillment. Church, don't be led astray. You know, the people of Israel were led astray in this very pursuit. It talks about it like this in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. God speaking to the people through his prophet Jeremiah. He says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters." Notice the symbolism and the parallelism here. He is referring to himself as the fountain of living waters. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. In other words, the people of Israel, they have forsaken the one true source of clean, pure, calm, cool water to quench their thirsting souls, and instead they've started pursuing their own things. And those are broken cisterns that leak, that cannot satisfy. This is what he's saying. It goes on to say in John chapter 7, verse 37. I love this verse. Church, this is an invitation for all of you today. It says, on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out. You ready for it? "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." This is an invitation to any of you that will come to him for it. If you're taking notes this morning, I wrote it down like this. When it says that he leads me beside still waters, what it means is that God satisfies the deepest longings of our heart. This is an invitation to every single one of you today. And so what do we see? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Here's the next line, the third one for this morning. And he restores my soul. Oh, come on, man, at church. Anybody grateful that we have a God that restores our soul? What a gift and an invitation. What an offer from the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that he would offer to restore our soul. Now, you got to understand what that word restores means to gain the full weight of what this offer actually entails. That word restores initially can mean this. It can mean to revive and refresh. So if you come in here today and you are worn out, you are burned out, you are tired, you're limping along, I want you to know there's a God who gives rest and will restore your soul. Will you come to him? Actually, this isn't in my notes. This one's for free too. I wrote this down. Got a lot of that today, apparently. The sermon's going to be longer than I meant for it to be. I took a sabbatical last summer. Thank you, church, for allowing me to go on that sabbatical. It was absolutely incredible for me. Here's what I learned. The antidote to burnout is not rest, it's presence. See, there's actually, rest is good and God brings rest, but rest by itself isn't enough. It's rest in his presence. See, it's the presence of God that actually satisfies. It's the presence of God that actually restores. And so when he says he restores my soul, what he's offering to you is not just rest, he's offering his presence to be with you. So the first word that restores can mean, the first word there is to revive or to refresh. But the Hebrew word there also means, restores also means to bring back. It means to return. One commentator wrote it like this. He said you could translate the verse, my soul he will bring back. And what the picture it has in mind is a wandering sheep. Y'all know sheep are prone to wander, right? Y'all remember that song? Prone to wander. Lord, I need you. I'm not going to keep going because I can't sing. That's where that hymn comes from. The sheep are prone to wander. And when it says he restores my soul, not only does he revive and refresh it, but he actually brings it back. When we wander away from the way of Jesus and the path of Jesus, we'll get to that more in a second. When we wander away, he restores us, means he turns us back. He brings us back into that place of refreshment and presence with God. But one of the greatest dangers to a sheep, Keller writes, is that it wanders off alone and gets cast. You ever heard of a sheep getting cast? You know what that means? To get cast means it falls over on its back and can't flip back over. So a cast sheep is when it's laying there on its back, just kicking his little legs, can't do nothing. So this apparently happens to sheep all too often. And so it's one of the reasons why the shepherd knows exactly how many sheep it's got. And so it's constantly going out in the fields and getting a head count of the sheep, because if one's missing, either it wandered off and it's in danger, or it wandered off and it's been cast. And if it's been cast, it's got hours to live. Hours to live. Because here's what's going to happen. One of two things. The predators are going to come and they go, oh, sweet, a snack on a platter. Don't even have to work for it. It's just the sheep can't go anywhere. All it can do is get eaten. Or watch this. It doesn't even have to be eaten. If it lays on its back long enough, it's going to die from its own weight bearing down on its organs. And it will just die in that place because it cannot get up. Now, Keller tells us in his book that there are three primary reasons that a sheep will become cast. I thought this was really insightful. The first reason is the sheep, they love to find the most comfortable places on the ground to sleep. And the most comfortable places for a sheep often involve a small depression in the ground, like a little hole in the ground. And if a sheep gets in that hole and he starts on the edge of it and he rolls into it, if he's not careful, he will roll too far, land on his back, and be stuck in that depression in the ground. And because he's looking for a place of comfort, he gets stuck upside down and it could cost him his life. It's really interesting. Second reason they can't get back up is because a lot of sheep, they got too much wool. They got too much stuff on them that's weighing them down, keeping them pinned to the ground, unable to turn over because of all the stuff they have with them. Here's the third reason. This is going to be blunt. This is probably too intense, but they're too fat. But listen, that's because it's eaten well. That's because the shepherd has been leading it to some good food. But if the shepherd's not careful, that sheep will eat too much food, it'll get too fat, and then it rolls over, it can't get back up. And literally could cost him its life. Too much of the good stuff can actually be a bad thing. So there's a word of comfort and a word of warning in this illustration when we talk about he restores my soul, the wandering sheep. Here's the word of comfort. Let's start with that. I don't know where you find yourself today, but if you have wandered off and you find yourself upside down, fallen, everything you try, unable to right yourself, I want you to know that there is a good shepherd who loves you, knows that you're missing, and is running after you to right you again. Will you let him? Will you let him pick you up? So what a shepherd would actually do when they found the sheep is not only would they right them, but when they right them, because they were upside down so long, their legs would have lost circulation. And so the shepherd would sit there and massage the circulation back into the legs of the sheep until the sheep is able to walk on its own again. If it can't walk, he carries it back with him. Hey, church, we have a good shepherd who cares for you, who wants to be there with you and for you. That's a word of comfort. But there's also a word of warning here. And the word of warning is the warning of wandering. And there's just this, can I just say it? Don't allow comfort to ruin your life. Don't allow the pursuit of comfort to take you away from the life that God has called you into. John Wesley, if you've ever heard of him, he was a revivalist of the 1700s. He and a guy named George Whitefield were two of the key figures that led America into the first Great Awakening, a powerful time of revival in the early years of our nation. And so John Wesley, he was preaching, and there was just revival, and people were coming to Jesus all over the place. But he began to notice this pattern of those who came to Jesus. Those that followed Jesus, he called them the faithful. When they became faithful, they followed the ways of God. And when you follow the ways of God, it produces the blessing of God. That's a good thing, everybody. It produced the blessing of God for these folks. And so they were working hard, they were industrious, it produced blessing. But what happened is the blessing, the prosperity, ended up producing comfort in their hearts. And if they weren't careful, what would happen to these people who had a genuine relationship with Jesus and were really following after his way, if they weren't careful, the comforts in their lives would begin to take priority over the pursuit of Jesus that they had in the first place. And the comfort would then lead to people walking away. Say, Joe, is that really true? Well, Jesus talked about it. He talked about the seed that was sown in the soil that had the weeds around it, and the weeds would grow up and it would choke that plant out. You know what he called the weeds? The riches of this world and the deceitfulness of the pleasures of life. There's nothing wrong with having comforts. The problem is when that becomes your pursuit. The problem is when that comfort takes precedence over God in your life. Does this make sense, everybody? And so his antidote, by the way, John Wesley, he said, here's what you got to do. Be extraordinarily generous. Keep the main things the main thing. Because if you don't, then comfort will steal your desire of pursuing Jesus in the first place. Here's the point. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. I got to wrap this up. God revives those that are worn out and rescues those that have wandered. That's who he is. It's what the good shepherd does. Here's the final thing, verse 3, the last part of verse 3. It says, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Say, Joe, why is this so important? Because as I mentioned before, we are prone to wander. And when we are prone to wander, we are prone to take the paths that do not lead to righteousness. We are prone to take the paths that we think look best, but do not lead us to God's best. One pastor said it like this. He said, we never wander our way to a deep, abiding relationship with Jesus. That only happens when we follow the paths of God, when we follow the paths of the good shepherd. Because here's the thing, sheep, they think they know what path is best. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up at the bottom of a 45-foot cliff with 449 of your brothers and sisters. Like that's what's going to happen. If you're not careful, you're going to look a lot like this sheep that I'm going to show you on the video. If you've never seen this clip, check this out real quick. This is a beautiful example of what I'm talking about. Look at that shepherd. Can y'all see that? Rescuing that little sheep. Just wait. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's what we look like. The shepherd rescues us out of our own mess, and we run right back to it. Does that sound familiar? Jumping right back into that place. This is what a sheep does when they are left to their own decisions. And can I tell you, we serve a God who knows infinitely more than we do. We serve a God who sees the end from the beginning. We serve a God who is so powerful that our minds can't even grasp it, who possesses so much knowledge that we cannot even begin to touch it. And this is the God that says, I love you and I'm for you and I want your best for you more than you want it for yourself. Think about it this way. Let me use this illustration. Imagine this entire auditorium. For those of you watching online, you're going to have to imagine this auditorium in your mind's eye. We've got about 700 seats in here. It's a pretty big room, about 25, 30-foot ceilings. Imagine this entire auditorium was filled with water, and that water represented all the knowledge in the world. All the knowledge of the universe was represented by the water in this one auditorium. Don't say it out loud, but I want you to think about this. How much of that water would you possess to represent your own knowledge? How much represents your knowledge? And then I want you to think about the smartest person you've ever heard of. Maybe somebody you've seen online, somebody you've read about. The smartest person you've ever heard of. Maybe they've gotten a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, then they got their doctorate, then they spent decades in their field reading and researching, and then they got bored with their field. They became too much of an expert in one field, and they went to another field. They began doing it again in that field. All of a sudden, man, they've got so much knowledge, and they have mastered a few thousand books worth of material. They've become familiar with tens of thousands of more concepts. That's a pretty smart person, is it not? They probably know a lot of things, do they not? Think about this. That person would have somewhere around, if you put it in perspective, maybe a coffee cup's worth of knowledge compared to this entire auditorium. I mean, you got to think about it. There's somewhere around 130 to 150 million books that have been written. If you read a book a week for 80 years, that would be 4,160 books read. That is let me get this percentage right because I want to make this up. That would be 0.00032% of all the books that have been written. And that's just book knowledge. We're not talking about knowledge of all the other things. We're not talking about all the knowledge that you gain through experience and crafts and by craftsmen and engineers and physicians and farmers and artists and cultures around the world. We're not talking about billions of web pages and articles. We're not even talking about articles. We're not even talking about peer-reviewed journal articles that have been written. We're not talking about centuries of accumulated scholarship. We're not even talking about all the knowledge that exists that hasn't even been discovered yet. You guys starting to see this? And so if you use that analogy, if the smartest person in the world has like a coffee cup worth of water, you might have like a teaspoon filled of water. And when you look at that coffee cup, man, they know like 3 to 4 times more than you. Man, that seems enormous. They seem so smart. And you're like, wow, they must know what they're talking about. As a coffee cup in a vast auditorium. But I put this into ChatGPT. And ChatGPT said, take that for what it's worth, that the analogy wasn't actually the water in the auditorium. They said it's a coffee cup of knowledge in the waters of the entire Atlantic Ocean. Is what the smartest person in the world can know in view of all the knowledge that has ever existed. Think you're smart yet? Okay. And the God of the universe possesses all of it. All of it. See, I got to get us thinking through this series. God is not like just way smarter than us. God's not just like a little bit bigger than us. He's not like the smartest human you've ever met. No, God is infinitely greater than that. The bigness of God, your mind cannot even fathom or grasp it. He is the author of truth. He is the possessor of all wisdom. So whose path are you going to trust? Your own path? The path of some smart person that you think knows more than you? Or the path of the creator of the universe? We have a choice here, church. And the good shepherd will lead us into paths of righteousness for his name's sake. See, the comfort of this psalm is not that the sheep understand everything. It's that the shepherd does. And the shepherd is good and loving and caring. And so when he says something's not good for you, church, it's not because he is some kind of cosmic killjoy. He says it because he knows it's what's best for you. If I could borrow an illustration I've used before. God's boundaries, when he puts boundaries in place, his boundaries are not prison bars. They are train tracks that lead to your greatest joy and most fulfilling life. Escaping them is not freedom, it's a train wreck. So if you're taking notes, here's the last note. Here's the last point. If God says it to us, it's because it's what's best for us. Church, you can trust him. But like sheep, we're prone to wander. What's the solution? We trust God, not ourselves. And God is extending an invitation to you. An invitation to you for a life of actual meaning and purpose. A life that can be filled with joy in spite of your circumstances. A life that can be marked by peace instead of anxiety. It's a life that is under the care of a good shepherd, but he will not force it upon you. He offers it to you. We've got to receive it. final verse, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Will you receive his invitation today? If you'd bow your heads and close your eyes, I just want to pray for you this morning.